Saturday is supposed to be up for 37. Sunday is supposed to be 34. And then after that, it's 4 days. Follow Friday and 50. So, it'll be warmer now. It says negative 29. It's been the average daily high.
Monday's also.
Actual is negative 20 right now, and it feels like negative 20.
All right. Well, you guys ready to get started?
Be ready.
You ready? You were ready like 3 hours ago, right?
No, not 3 hours ago. I was sleeping.
All right. Good to see everybody today. Good morning. So I want to read from Philippians 3:1-7, and then somebody can open a prayer for us, whoever would like to. Be ready for that afterwards. Or I might call on you, but I'd rather somebody just jump in. Here we go. Philippians 3:1-7. Finally, my brothers, rejoice in the Lord. To write the same things to you is no trouble to me and is safe for you. Look out for the dogs, look out for the evildoers, look out for those who mutilate the flesh. For we are the circumcision who worship by the Spirit of God and glory in Christ Jesus, and put no confidence in the flesh. Though I myself have reason for confidence in the flesh also, if anyone else thinks he has reason for confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, a persecutor of the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. But whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ. So the warning there is that we look out for anything that will harm our relationship with God, or we look out for pride and position and things like that we pursue rather than pursuing Christ first and foremost. He says, I counted all but loss for the sake of Christ. So whatever gain I had, it's nothing compared to him. All right, who would like to open in prayer for us this morning? Okay, Dylan.
Lord Jesus, we're just grateful for this morning that you've made, Lord God. I just pray that you would just speak to you, Pastor Pryor, as he teaches us about your Pastoral Epistles, Lord Jesus. Lord God, you'd be able to take something away from this that we can apply to our ministries, and then also just our day-to-day lives, Lord Jesus. That you bless the class, bless the rest of the day.
Amen. Thank you. No, no, Eli's out of town, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's suffering.
Something for Jesus and for
Suffering for Jesus. All right, so before I get into the lecture and the stuff we're going to talk about, I updated the group things. Did you guys see that? And I updated the dates for the group presentations. So this should be, I think I might not have, yeah, I did update the dates. In the syllabus, that's where I did it. But group one, dramatic reenactment on April 21st. And then group two is the debate on April 23rd. And group three, podcast, April 28th. And group four, interactive Bible study, April 30th. So tried to get all those in the last 2 weeks. And still have time to do the final and all that good stuff. So, any questions or comments or corrections or anything? Okay. You guys excited about doing your reenactment? Yay! I'm interested in the debate. I'm interested in that. I should be? Well, make sure it's biblically sound. Well, it's a debate, so I guess part of it might not be biblically sound,
I
right?
was gonna say, for it to be a good debate, someone's gotta be stopping heresy stuff.
Yeah, gotta have a heretic.
Maybe that's the heresy.
Oh. Now you want to heresy.
All right, so we're gonna just start getting more into the actual passages now and looking at some specifics. So let's just start by reading 1 Timothy 1, verses 3 through 11. And who would like to read that good and nice and loud for us? How about,
Can get it. Read it.
no, what?
Second again.
No, I'm gonna get somebody that doesn't normally, you're always good, you're a good guy.
I can read it, no.
No, you can't read it.
Okay, I can't read it.
I need Isabella to read it. Is that okay?
I walk up there because I can't see the word.
You can't see it?
Well, it is pretty small text.
How about Melissa, can you see it good?
Yeah.
Okay.
As I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus, so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies, which promote speculations rather than the stewardship from God that is by faith. The aim of our charge is love that issues from a pure heart and a good conscience, and a sincere faith. Certain persons, by swerving from these, have wandered away into vain discussions, desiring to be teachers of the law without understanding either what they are saying or the things about which they make confident assertions. Now we know that the law is good if one uses it lawfully, understanding this, that the law is not laid down for the just, but for the lawless and disobedient, for the ungodly and sinners, for the unholy and profane, for those who strike their fathers and mothers, for murderers, the sexually immoral, men who practice homosexuality, enslavers, liars, perjurers, and whatever else is contrary to sound doctrine, in accordance with the gospel of the glory of the blessed God, which I have been entrusted.
Okay. Now, Marlissa, you have 5 minutes to create a children's lesson out of that. Just kidding. You could do it. All right. So there's some phrases there, some things that are interesting to look at and kind of define the parameters, if you will, of this, where he's going. And so he says there, as I urged you when we were in Ephesus before I left for Macedonia. So he's reminding them, hey, remember when we were still in Ephesus, right before I left to go northwest up to Macedonia, remember our discussion, I urged you about this. And so he's reminding him, it's a conversation they've been having. So he's continuing the conversation. It's not like it's just out of the blue. So the issue of false teachers was not new to Timothy. They had discussed it before. And now Timothy's there without Paul. He's the person responsible now, and he is tasked with this important thing to deal with. So the word urged, let's see here, is from the Greek parakaleo, which is the word we get from, the word where we get paraklesis, or the comforter. That's the same word, but this word here, it ranges in meaning from cheerful encouragement, so it depends on context. 1 Thessalonians 3:2, stern admonition in Philippians 4, and this word occurs in every one of Paul's epistles except for Galatians. It's used by Paul 54 times, and 8 of those times he uses this word in the pastoral epistles. So when I see that, as I urged you, what does that look like to you when he says, as I urged you? What kind of attitude, or how would you take that if you were hearing that from someone? Remember when I urged you to do such and such? Yeah.
Like I told you before.
I wanted you.
Yeah, do it again.
Do it again?
Or listen to what I said this
Or
time.
do as I told you.
Do as I told you? But what about the actual word urged?
Kind of like pushy.
A little bit of a,
Convincing,
Yeah.
what's that?
like convincing.
Convincing? Yeah, a little bit of a, this is important. It's not like, hey buddy, remember what I told you? You didn't do it. Now get it done. It's not that, right? It's, remember, this is important. We talked about it before. Now you're here. Now you're it's with you to deal with. So the word urge or urged is used by Paul in a way that leaves some wiggle room for those to whom he is talking. So when Paul uses this term, it can have a few different ways of approaching it, but it's not a dictatorial command. He's not ordering Timothy around. That's not the relationship that they had. He was his son in the Lord. He was his brother in the Lord. He was his fellow minister in the Lord. And as the apostle Paul, he was strongly encouraging him, but not, giving him an order. That's not the way Paul did things usually. It was more of, I want you to understand how serious this is, and you work towards dealing with it. So it's strong, but he's not like just throwing around his authority. So, any thoughts or questions? Okay. So I have a quote from the man himself, Dr. Yarkworth. This wording fits the frequent Pauline pattern of tactful suasion, and there's some examples there in other places too. Tactful suasion rather than heavy-handed direct decrees, which in turn points to Paul's conviction that Christ and his Spirit unite and direct rather than rely on domineering tactics, even by an apostle. So from the outset, this approach gives 1 Timothy the feel of one side of the discussion between two parties about a situation and how it should be handled, rather than a superior talking down to an underling and prescribing the next moves. So it's got this, I like what he says, it points to Paul's conviction that Christ and his Spirit unite and direct rather than rely on domineering tactics, even by an apostle. I wanted to point that out because there's some good stuff there for us to learn as people in ministry. Whether you are a Timothy or a Paul, right? Whatever position you might be in ministry, whether you're an intern or a superintendent, right? There's something about how we treat one another. So if you happen to be a lead pastor, or maybe you're principal of a school, or running a business, it doesn't matter. How do you treat those that work, that you're responsible for, that work under you, basically? How do you work with them? Is it a collaboration? Or is it you just give them a checklist and say, get this done by such and such time? What do you think of that? As a pastor, maybe you've had those experiences where it feels like you're just being told what to do rather than asked to consider, to step into the decision-making process. Any thoughts? So what is, trying to think of another way to say it. Maybe I'm not saying it correctly. I just see there that Paul is respecting Timothy and trusting him to do the work. He's not telling him how to do it. He's just telling them that it needs done. And they've spent time together, so Timothy knows, he's learned from Paul already. Okay? I've had people in my life, in ministry, leadership over me that, thankfully, almost everybody that I've worked under as an authority over me have been very much like that. But there have been a few that are very callous, or they're just not sensitive. They don't think about how it comes across to other people. So I think it's important to collaborate, to work, I don't care how much more you know than somebody else, you can still learn from them. You can still gain just from listening to their heart. So, okay? So we know that Paul had earlier urged Timothy to remain in Ephesus, and now we see in this epistle he's reminding him about that instruction. So right at the offset he says, remember when we were in Ephesus, I urged you to remain there. And that is part of this process. So why was it important for Timothy to remain in Ephesus? He told him in those first few verses to put a stop to some things, right? To address or to confront those who were giving false doctrine. To put a stop to heretical teaching. So some important terms there that we see, if we go back to the passage. Oops. Some important terms we see there is command, certain people, and false doctrines. So in this one, in this ESV that I'm using, he says, remain at Ephesus so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine. That's the same as in other translations it would say command. But anyway, so we see command or charge. Paul uses that term 12 times in total, 5 of those in 1 Timothy, to charge or to command. See, he used the same word when he sent out the 12, or Jesus used the same word when he sent out the 12 in Matthew 10 when he commanded the crowd to be seated in Matthew 15, and when commanding an unclean spirit to depart in Luke 8. So it is a strong word. It's not like a suggestion. It's not like, well, if you'd like to, why don't you go ahead and do this? He's saying you need to strongly tell these people, charge these people not to teach any different doctrine. And so he's encouraging Timothy, this is really serious. You have to face it seriously. And false doctrine is the topic, right? False doctrine is the issue. False doctrine, different doctrine, endless myths, endless genealogies, all this kind of stuff that draws people away from the truth of the gospel and sound doctrine. That is an important task of a pastor in a church. Yes?
I think it's almost like when you're faced with all of that, the temptation is to just give up and be like, these people are hopeless, and like run away from them. And I feel like Paul's being like, no, like you, even though you're like young and like this is stressful and these people are really messing things up, you need to stay here. Like you are given authority by God to confront this, and like you can't be overrun by these people.
Yeah. It's a balancing act, because I've been a young pastor and I've been an older pastor, and so I've been in those situations where I know, even though I'm young, that is not sound doctrine, because I've studied. I just know, I know the difference. But then to address it is another, that's another story. And so you can be strong like that and not come across like you're proud and a know-it-all. There's a way to do it. And it depends on your personality and how you communicate. But Paul was saying, Timothy, you can do this. You find a way to do it. But I've done it in different ways. I've addressed it from the pulpit before, just generically, just pointing out things that are false doctrines, that are not biblical, that are not right, that are popular out there, not really pointing to anybody in particular. Or I've done it more specifically, naming names and giving address, not giving address. Anyway, so I've done it both ways. But it has to be done, in other words. And so, yeah, that's good, Aubrey. Anybody else? Has anybody had to deal with this in any way? Maybe not as a pastor, obviously, but in some way in other settings where you've had to deal with something is not biblically sound and you have to talk to people about it. Or you just don't talk to them, right? No? Yeah?
Yeah, there was an instance that, I'm sure a lot of you have heard about this, but at North Dakota camp a couple years back, when Brad Riley came to speak, and he was talking about the Nephilim and stuff like that.
Oh,
And like, it's like, this is the church together.
yes.
Sit your butt down, let's not preach heresy, let's talk about Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's getting off on, stuff.
It's
Yeah.
and then just, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
I had a friend who was here last year. Right after he left, he kind of went down a bit of an interesting rabbit hole. I was posting a lot of stuff on his Facebook, and quite a few of it was pretty interesting, to say the least. So some of it, obviously I kind of just let go because it's like kind of difficult to address some of those themselves. And I did address to him personally. Unfortunately, didn't help him much, but
Yeah.
it was kind of unfortunate to see all that.
Yeah. So what do you do in that kind of situation when you can't really, sometimes you're not in a position to really correct somebody. for them, and if God gives you an opportunity to talk to them, then that would be great. Okay, so, let's see here. And then the phrase, certain people, that was the next important term that we were going to look at. That refers to, let me get, certain people refers to some that, in quotes, there's some in verse 6. Depending on the translation, it might use a different term, and maybe the some in verse 19, including Hymenaeus and Alexander. So in verse 6, in the ESV it says certain persons, but in other translations it says some. By swerving from these, the good doctrines, have wandered away into vain discussions. So certain people refer to those ones that are mentioned that have drifted away. And that might even include Hymenaeus and Alexander. In chapter 1, verses 19 and 20, holding faith and a good conscience by rejecting this, some, there's that word again, have made shipwreck of their faith, among whom are Hymenaeus and Alexander, whom I have handed over to Satan, that they may not learn to blaspheme. That's pretty,
Getting called out by
That's
name.
shot out.
yeah, by name, yeah. He gave their name and address. Okay. So these certain people, though, whoever they might be, are they're less known by their name than by their misrepresentations of the gospel, which Paul repeatedly reminds Timothy to address. One thing you see in most of the epistles, I think all of them really, at some point or another, some way more than others, is Paul calling out false teaching and reminding them, hey, where's your original faith? What happened to you? Why are you drifting down this way? Why are you going back to the law? Why are you going back to being entrapped by something you can't fix? So he's constantly talking about false teaching, or why are you drifting away from what you knew you're supposed to do? So that's a big deal to Paul. Sound doctrine, sound gospel teaching, focusing on Jesus, focusing on salvation, that is Paul's aim. And so when he mentions that a lot, he talks about that a lot. And that phrase, false doctrines, corresponds to one Greek word apparently coined by Paul himself. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but you can if you want. Meaning teaching that deviates from a standard. So he made up this word to, basically define what he's trying to talk about, teaching that deviates from a standard. Yarborough says, for Paul to write this word implies that there were doctrinal norms in place already in the mid-first century. So already that's still that close to the original when Jesus was there, and Jesus' death and resurrection. Not that far away from that, there's already doctrinal norms in place for the church in the mid-first century. And so Paul is telling them, we need to not stray away from these doctrinal norms, these foundational truths. And it's the same thing today. There are certain things that are not negotiable. There are certain things that you cannot say, well, that might mean this or it might mean that. There's some things that are just the truth and essential to the gospel, essential to everything we believe, everything the Bible teaches. He's telling them these people are getting off focus. Maybe some of the things they're saying might be true, might not be true. Who knows? It doesn't matter because they're off target. They're off target. And for the church, for believers, our target is the Great Commission. Our target is redemption and reconciliation and discipleship and showing showing, teaching people the power of the Holy Spirit in their lives and how to live for God. And, you know, just daily, I mean, when somebody's struggling with addictions and all kind of stuff, they don't need to go to Bible study on Wednesday night and hear a lesson about the Nephilim or the whatever, right? Or the blood moons. They need to hear about Jesus, right? They need to be reminded how to live for Jesus. And so many times, as a pastor, I've had people ask me, well, what about this or that, or the blood moons? Even here on campus, I've had, not students actually, I've had other people ask me, what about the Nephilim? Were they real, or Nephilim? I don't even know how you say it. What is that? And I tell them, I don't know. That's not my issue. That's not what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned, are you following Jesus? You know, we can learn about that other stuff as a hobby or something, but that's not what we're going to study to make ourselves closer to God. And as teachers of the Word, preachers of the Word, leaders of the Word, we need to keep the main thing, right? There's enough there to keep us busy without having to go all these other directions. That's my opinion, so. Any thoughts or comments? All right. So, just reminding him the dangers of false teachings. The focus should be on God's plan and intentions for the world, not speculative stories and alternative narratives. In the passage, he, let's see. Can't find what I'm looking for, but there's the idea that don't come against the teaching that is separating the people from God's plan, from God's economy. Remember, we used that, I talked about that word the other day. God's economy, God's plan, the thing that he has for us. So Paul charges Timothy to address those people teaching those things because they just promote controversial speculations instead of advancing God's work. Yarbrough says that Paul says such things promote controversial speculations rather than advancing God's work, which is by faith. God's work is his management of the world to the redemptive end he has for it. From beginning to end, God's heart is, he has a plan. He has a goal, and it is relationship with people, reconciliation, to love us and to have us love him and each other. So, questions, comments? Okay, I have something for you guys to do just for fun. Get in a group of like 3 or 4 people, no more than 4, and do a quick dive into that verses 19 and 20. What does Paul mean when he says, whom I have handed over to Satan that they may not learn to blaspheme? And then come back and each group let me know what you come up with here in about 10 minutes.
You know, it seems like we're like,
You just doing rules or what?
Who's Joe? I'm gonna go job.
shut up. My guess is it's just letting their lives be difficult.
Huh?
My guess is it's just letting their lives be difficult.
Especially wasn't
Hey, Sharon.
come on over.
I think that's how it was.
Is he pretty much saying that they're going
I
to
think he
school?
called Paul. He's like, man, I used to work for you, you know. Like, bring them up. Like,
Yeah,
hey,
I'm one of your
My
employees.
youth pastor teaches.
These are really good ones, you should pick
If you
up.
let them
They're doing really
fall
good.
in, that'll be like a natural teaching lesson. But when people are in the church, they're naturally protected by the members of the church. So if they're taken away from that
These guys are doing really
then they're
good.
forced to live
You
on
might
their
have to
own.
look it up, you might have to do a little
There you
digging,
go.
right?
That's all.
Oh no, we got the answer.
You already know.
Yeah, you know how he's Paul, right? Paul's like, you know how he's like, I used to work for you, Satan. So you bring him up on the phone, it's like, hey, these two guys would be great for you.
That was it.
Fagan said he's calling the Satan's HR department to refer them.
Yes.
Which I think is very.
I think that's very biblically sound. Definitely not. Maybe, definitely
You've heard of
not-
poaching employees before, but not reverse poaching.
Reverse coaching.
Yeah, Paul used to be the man for Satan, but now, he's like, I don't work for you,
He
but.
said that before in Corinthians.
Okay, so
Huh.
this is interesting.
Somebody that was,
This commentary
I forget
says,
what it was.
in the mind of Paul,
Was
once
caught
a
in
faith
sin,
was
it wasn't
therefore no mere refusal to accept the
Turned him over to Satan for the,
definite
for
religion's
the,
dogma,
whatever.
but was ever closely connected with the purity and the love of the Spirit.
I like his thought.
My youth pastor would teach this passage similar to 1 Corinthians.
Yeah,
Paul says
just
the
kinda-
exact same
just
thing.
kinda letting
And the
them
member
deal
of the
with the
church out
consequences
so
of
he
their
may suffer,
actions.
so that he may not die in
I
sin.
feel like that's a very,
So the idea is
very
that you bring them out
godly
to Satan so he suffers and then he'll learn from his
Hey, you
ways
guys
through
keep
that
messing up. I told
suffering.
you not to.
And then eventually you'll re-invite them back
Stop.
into
Probably 'cause they
the
were
church is a
never
place of
repentant.
protection, and there's members always being with you. If you take people from that community, then you're just on your own suffering.
yeah,
And
you
it
just
becomes
remember how to
progress.
love you more.
Yeah, take them out of that leadership position and like, go work on yourself a little bit.
Basically, but if they are teaching this blasphemy, then they're probably in cahoots with Satan himself, which is going to be the adversary to them and be hurting them.
I'm using my resources.
Yeah, we're doing
And
research, guys.
either they are no longer going to be in contact with the church of their thing, or they'll come back and they will be protecting themselves.
Here's my commentary on 1 Timothy.
Hey, you ain't ever gonna catch me.
No, not a big
I'm a
commentary.
teacher who uses, I'm
Matthew Henry's version.
Basically.
Stop it! I need to beat the crap out of him.
Delete it.
Are we talking about John right now? Is that right?
Yeah, that's really weird actually.
He's one of our team members. We appreciate it.
There we go.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of giving me reminders of when you when you go through the whole, if somebody is caught in sin, first approach them by yourself and then bring them where they're at.
You just give a shout out.
And then at that point,
have
after
to
they
assume
don't
that-
change their lives.
Yeah, to get a shout out like that, you've got to be doing some. You got to be doing some bad.
So I feel like it's kind of that same thing of like,
You gotta
these guys obviously aren't going to change, so don't let that destroy your relationship.
You gotta add it all to this.
Did get
My oldest brother, who says
It's
you
the
have to
same.
go to church to be a Christian. You're correct. Using theoretically,
Don't
you
dread
don't
that.
have to go to church to be a Christian. However, when you don't go to church, you lose out on the protections of being in church. That as well.
Right. I believe you boys. You guys got this.
Where are you going?
He's got to go split it.
Yeah, we got it set up.
No.
Yeah. Restoration.
I believe in you all.
Oh, and what if you
I think you'll give the right answers of how you bring up the phone.
don't talk.
Bold. Who's bold? Bold.
You would
My brother was unmanageable and talked about
the bears. The bears. Lord.
I forgot about that part. We're fine.
Wow.
I'm joking. You say like this kid.
didn't make up his name. Never learn, no one taught me.
That's the point.
I can try to like draw more. Yeah, my family.
I'm putting that in cool.
Izzy, Aubrey, you just think about what's positive and then say the opposite. Yeah. But you gotta make it like sound like kind of. That's why
Well, one of them probably did it, and all the rest of them
Okay, has anybody got it all figured out?
No one actually.
Stop.
What?
Oh, wait, yeah, I did kind of have a thought.
I was thinking like we actually.
Sorry, I'm not used to that being a good answer.
Okay, how about, y'all ready to say something? Yeah, I'm gonna ask each group. Okay.
Am I first? All
Yeah,
right.
everybody listen up over here.
In my youth group,
Wait a minute. Hey, guys. Listen to Zachary.
in my youth group, we covered this and drew the connection between this passage in 1 Corinthians when the guy was sleeping with his wife. Paul told the church of Corinth to cast him out so he may suffer through Satan. And the idea is that he would suffer through this blasphemy so that he could be corrected through the sin and punishment of sin, while a church building or a church community would normally protect the fellow and keep him away from that suffering. If you're cast out alone, then you don't have that community protecting you. So it's like a refining process.
Right.
Then Lindsay also had an idea from a commentary.
Oh yeah. So the commentary I saw talked about like the shipwreck part. And it's like the simile being the good conscience represents cargo of the ship, and when this is tossed overboard, the vessel becomes unmanageable and is tossed about, the plaything of the waves, and in the end is wrecked.
That's cool. Good. Yeah.
I'll talk for you, but I know how to go for worship.
Okay.
So the way we kind of understood it was like you got somebody under your pastoral care and your leadership, so long you're trying to pour into them, and like there's just no fruit. There's no fruit of growth. Like they're just not getting it. They're still living in the world. Like sometimes you just gotta take your hand off for a while. You gotta take your hand off for a while. Okay, like
Right.
Lord, you're gonna have your way. Or enemy's gonna stir them up a little bit. Maybe they'll come back to you. You just kind of hope to come back to them. That's the way we understood it.
Okay. All right. Nolan, did you have your?
Yeah, ours kind of went along with like what you kind of said before, but it was just, it seems like kind of a God thing to do is just to let somebody kind of suffer a little bit and say, you know, since you've decided to be such an idiot, you can now deal with your consequences.
And it's not necessarily such an idiot. Like we talked about, like to get a shout out by name, you gotta
you gotta do something.
You gotta be doing some crazy stuff. You gotta like be doing it for probably a while. And the thing that we talked about was like the steps that you go through to like confront someone in the church. And like
Right.
first you go to them, and then take it to others in the church.
Right.
If you gotta take it to God, that's
And then
probably
cast them
pretty
on. If you gotta be like, hey man, I'm writing to you. These guys are enough. it just like, it seems like the right, like, process step. I would assume that they would have gone
Probably
through
already gone through.
a lot of other things for them to get to that point.
Good? Good?
Yeah, yeah. So we pretty much, same consensus as everyone, where it's not like a curse or anything that you put upon them. It's not like different from a spanking or it's just like relinquishing your, like, the care, relinquishing. That and just saying, well, you guys are doing us harm, so we're not gonna like help you actively do it. So, good luck.
Okay. All right. Good?
So basically it refers to church discipline, where those two individuals were removed from the Christian community due to blasphemy. And being hindered over the sin means they were exposed to the consequences of their sin outside of the church's protection. However, the goal was for correction and repentance, not simply for their own destruction, like it's not some vengeance thing, but it's specifically intended to, hey, we're going to kick you out so that you can learn from your mistakes and come back. We want you to come back, but yeah, so it's a good new fashion shine.
Good fashion stuff, yeah.
Okay. How about you?
Yeah, I think it's basically the same conclusion that Paul kind of distancing himself from these people in hopes that they were going to come back. So excommunicating them.
Yeah. Did you say shunning? Did you say that? Yeah.
Is that not
So,
supposed to?
what we said for our group is it was just kind of some kind of discipline form. It probably involves some kind of out the world, away from the Christian protection, the church protection, to where most likely due to, like, obviously Paul, or Hope, assumed that he was trying to correct them, wasn't getting any progress, so then he had to be like, well, I can't do anything, I'm gonna leave that into God's hands, excommunicate them, with the intention that they get their act together.
So everybody kind of landed on the same spot there. It wasn't like he was, like you guys said, calling up Satan's HR department. But in practical terms, that's not an easy thing to do in our culture, because you don't want to get sued or get blasted on social media, but sometimes you've got to deal with things, right? If you've tried everything, the process, and people still are being, trying to teach false doctrine, trying to stir up bad stuff in the church, then you have to take steps to, but you don't hate them, you don't want them to go to hell or anything, you just have to protect the rest of the body. So that's part of leadership, is protecting the church. So, all right, you guys have a great day.
I guess there's music sound for you on Friday. You're getting muted. Or are you playing drum for Friday?
I was thinking.
Yeah.